Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels with me, Martin, Sean and Jill.
Hi.
And we're back from Australia now, so hello everybody, and we'll be finding out a little bit more about our travels later. And I'm also going to be chatting to Tom Brown from West Dean Gardens in Sussex.
And we'd just quickly like to say thank you to Plant Grow for supporting the Pots and Trowels podcast. Plant Grow make a range of products, liquid feeds, mulches, and it's all made from plants that are plant matter that's organically grown in Norfolk. So thanks to them.
Good stuff.
And we'll be talking about some of the highlights of our trip down under, won't we? As well as going to see the family, there were so many other things that we did and saw. And then you've got some jobs for us, and we've got some listeners' questions as well. But first, shall we hear what you were chatting about with Tom?
Okay. Tom, thank you very much for joining us today. You're a head gardener, you're a broadcaster, writer, RHS flower show judge. So you've got a really good career in horticulture. But tell us, how did it all start for you?
I think my sort of interest in horticulture started with a need and a passion to nurture things. So whether that was sort of pets as a child or just seeing plants grow on the windowsill, or house plants is where it really started for me. When I say house plants, it was a few cactus and succulents, really nothing grand like dripping windowsills full of philodendrons or anything like that. But it started off with a few house plants. And then I started digging over a piece of ground out the front of my parents' house, just really out of boredom, I think, more than anything else. And there was an antiques fair that used to be in the village, and I went down there, and there's a man that sold plants, and I sort of was poking around some of these plants, just sort of looking at what caught my eye, because I didn't really know where to start. And I started talking to him, and he said, "Why don't you buy a few shrubs, and then come back next month, and if they're all okay, why don't you buy a few perennials, and then come back and we'll talk about some bedding plants." And it kind of snowballed from there. And I remember getting really interested in it and saying to my dad, I really want to go to horticultural college after my GCSEs. And he was pretty insistent that I did my A-levels. And then after that, I could then go to college at Merriswood in the end. So I went to Merriswood and started getting a job at RHS Wisley, but in the garden centre. And I was one of the stock takers, if you like. And my job was to go around with a load of paperwork and a binder and count all the different shrubs. And then the supervisor at the time would then see how many Berberis he'd sold, and then could work out how many needed to order to restock the shelves. And my plant knowledge really started to go great guns at that point, because I was seeing these plants every week. I had the really good job of the shrubs because they were reasonably distinctly different. So if you've got lots of different Berberis, there's a purple foliage one, a green foliage one, a yellow foliage one. My friend on the perennials had less of a fun time, because all the Hemerocallis, all the Campanulas all look the same. So then having to read every single label to decipher which variety was which. He used to pull his hair out at tea time when I was flying and I was on the home straight. So that was great. And going to college and working at the garden centre at Wisley, it was a really nurturing place. And I loved it, and I loved the person that I could sort of grow into it in that space. So whenever I have any sort of young gardeners that work with me, I'm sort of quite hell-bent on trying to create the most nurturing, kind, supportive environment, because I think that first workplace makes such a difference.
Absolutely.
In sort of shaping you and your direction. If you have a rotten time, it can put you off, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that first, not only year, but the first few months of a job like that is what makes you decide whether you're going to stick with it or whether you're going to leave it. I mean, did you, obviously, it sounded like you were intent on being in horticulture, but, your dad asked you to do your A-levels, you did. Did you also have another career in mind just in case you didn't do it, or were you determined that horticulture was the path for you?
Teaching was something that I quite liked the idea of. And I think what's really nice about horticulture is that it just branches off, forgive the pun, in lots of different directions. So when you become a horticulturalist, you then can branch off into teaching. And now I do a number of courses at West Dean where I'm teaching students. We have the RHS students, we've got design students that come here. So yeah, I think if I wasn't a gardener, I think I probably would have looked at teaching if that profession would have had me.
Yeah, and I think that is something about horticulture, that once you've got that knowledge and experience, and you obviously have, you want to pass that on to other people, don't you? So I think that automatically makes you a teacher, the fact that you want to pass that on in a passionate way.
Yes, definitely. And sort of telling people through that basis of experience as well, and just sort of communicating things. Because I think with a lot of textbooks, they can sort of be quite daunting for people, but if you can break it down and say, okay, we're going to take a cutting. If you look at a couple of pages in a book, you'll probably go a bit cross-eyed and not know where to begin. But actually, let's look at the plant, look at the leaf node. That's where you take the cutting because X, Y, and Z. I really enjoy sort of breaking it down and making it more palatable for people. I think that's a real joy in teaching.
Absolutely. Now, at the moment, you're head gardener at West Dean in West Sussex, sort of south of the country. But before that, you were head gardener on another estate, weren't you?
Yeah. So from the garden centre at Wisley, I sort of hopped over the fence and was in the garden there for about 6 or 7 years and finished off running the trials side of things. And then moved to Parham House, which is in West Sussex, or in the south part of the country, and was the head gardener there. And what was the right time for me to move to Parham, because it was a 4-acre wall garden with an 11-acre sort of pleasure grounds. It was a privately run charity, but it sort of created a microcosm of all the different aspects of horticulture that I'd been perhaps specialised in at Wisley. So we had a fruit department at Wisley, a vegetable department, a tree department, and you were very much focused on that particular side of horticulture. Whereas the head gardener role at Parham gave me the opportunity to indulge in all of it, and also sort of develop my skills and develop the kind of gardener that I am in a small garden to begin with, which I could then develop. And that was really important for me. And I think if I could give any advice to people starting in their career, is to really sort of try to start to understand what kind of gardener you are. Be creative, make mistakes, because you can't replicate anybody else's style. You've got to discover who you are and what kind of gardener you are. And Parham was perfect for me for that.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing taking on a role like that is it's a great learning curve for you, isn't it? Because you've already got so much knowledge that you take to the job, but all of a sudden you've got all these other areas so you're constantly learning and finding out more about the plants and growing techniques, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. And you can't underestimate that sense of space either. So you've got to be careful when you sort of move into a new garden as a head gardener. You don't go in there all guns blazing thinking you know everything, because actually what you know, you need to adapt to that new garden and the way that plants respond in that new garden. So it's quite a humbling process as well, because you definitely have to find that sort of relationship with your new garden as well, regardless of how many years you've been doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing about horticulture. You never learn it all, do you? You're only just scratching the surface, really, because there is so much to learn. So all fascinating. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a short break. And then when we come back, we're going to find all about West Dean and your role there.
Great.
I love that. It's almost a quote that we could have, isn't it? You need to find your relationship with a new garden. I think that's so true, because even if you think you know an awful lot about a particular plant, if you put it in a different garden, it's going to respond differently, isn't it? So the soil, the light, the conditions. So I think that's a really good mantra to have.
It is, yeah. And no two gardens are the same.
No.
You often get people living on the same street, and one person can grow a plant and they can't grow it further down the street because soil changes. So yes, it's a good point. That I'll make a note of that, Jill. Yeah.
If I was going to have a teacher of horticulture, I would like it to be Tom. I think he has. I mean, he was very much about that nurturing.
I'm just thinking how Martin's feeling after how many years. Write that down as well.
He's not patient enough.
I lectured for 9 years at a college.
Yeah, I know, but with me, you're not patient enough. I think you need somebody slightly withdrawn.
You've got the job, Tom.
Sign here, please.
But I just think he's got such a lovely manner, and he's obviously very patient, and it's all about taking it at the student's level, isn't it? I think that's so important.
Spoken like a teacher.
It is, yeah, exactly, yeah. And he is. No, I know what exactly you mean. He's a really, really nice young guy. He's very knowledgeable, and he is passionate about his job and horticulture. Yeah, definitely is.
And he's done a few things, and we'll hear some more about
well, West Dean, we've been before, which you'll find out later all about when we were last there.
We hold it dear to our hearts.
Oh, we do. We must go back again.
We should.
We should. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Well, talking about you two going places, this I can't hold against you. You've been to Sydney. You've been to Australia, not to Sydney. Not just to Sydney. You've been to the Barossa Valley. Yeah. Listeners to the podcast might have heard last week's and heard a bit about what you got up to in Sydney Botanic Gardens and the Barossa Nursery. But tell me some of the highlights of the trip.
It was fantastic, wasn't it? We've been back a few days now, just about over the jet lag. So it's just take a while, doesn't it? But it was lovely. There was so many highlights, really. I mean, I have to say, my first highlight was probably a non-horticultural one, because I've always wanted to go to the Opera House in Sydney and see that. And I have to say, when we first sort of got there and saw it, I was a bit disappointed because it looks so tiny. Because you see the photos of it on its own, and it looks quite big, doesn't it? Really, but
and
when
it
you're
is
actually,
big.
it is big, but because it's now surrounded by skyscrapers of all sorts, it actually looks quite small. When you're inside it, it's completely different, of course. But the structure itself, we had a guided tour.
Did you learn about the history?
All about it,
and all
yes,
the
and the
competitions that
architect, and it was wonderful. And then we actually saw a performance of the Messiah as well in the afternoon, which was fantastic.
I have to say, we went on honeymoon to Australia, so we did that same tour of the Opera House, well, not necessarily the same one. And when we were touring, they were rehearsing, some of the choirs were rehearsing, and it was just wonderful. And then we went that evening to see a play, actually. So we had a similar experience. It is a wonderful place.
It is, absolutely.
I found it really interesting that the outside's made of tiles.
Yes.
Which is obvious, really, but when you look at it close up, it's lots and lots of
and they're
tiles.
sort of like little bathroom tiles, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the guy was telling us, because of the intense heat there, when they were made, they were double fired, weren't they, to give them that
Because of
extra
the heat.
strength. And they've done a really good job, he said, because they only replace a handful a year on all those roofs. So that's all they have to replace. And he said they've got 40,000 spare in store to replace them as they need them. So they're going to last a long time.
Yeah.
Good.
I suppose a highlight for me was plants, because I was just fascinated by the diversity of what people grow. I mean, they've got the climate to grow more or less anything. I think as long as they can keep it watered, it will grow. But we saw so many plants that we were growing in our gardens here in England, which would have probably gone across with the early European settlers to get their little bit of home there. But then there's tropical plants and plants from all over the world. So it is amazing. It really is.
And they're very hot on keeping their horticultural, sort of, I don't know what the phrase is, but not letting in alien species, aren't they?
Yeah, biosecurity as
That's
well.
it.
They're really hot on that. And there is a big movement as well. Although they've got these plants from all around the world, they are pushing native plants. And when we chatted to Daniel at the Barossa Nursery, which was last week's podcast, and we've done a video of that as well that you can find on YouTube, some of his biggest selling plants are all the natives, and they've got so many amazing plants that grow in the wild.
It makes sense to use plants that are adapted for that climate rather than to try and artificially.
Okay. But again, it's that sense of history, though, isn't it? Because you look round where we were staying in the Barossa region, the particular town we were in, there were roses everywhere, and people had standard roses, shrub roses, all sorts, didn't they? Lining the garden,
like an English garden.
Yeah. And you just think that is the history, because it's not that long ago that the first people were coming over from European countries and England, and they did want that little bit of home, didn't they? So you can understand why they've got those sorts of gardens. But it was fascinating, wasn't it? And the koalas we saw. So we saw a couple of koalas, kangaroos, and so it was.
Yes,
it was
you fed some kangaroos, didn't you?
I did. Yeah,
and
we went to a sanctuary, didn't we, where they'd been hand-reared.
Yes,
so
and we mustn't forget the main highlight.
You should probably have led with this.
Wedding. Well, that was the main reason we went out. Our daughter was getting married, so that was absolutely fantastic.
Yes, it was.
And our
spending
2 young
time with the granddaughters.
Absolutely loved it. They were flower girls, so it was beautiful.
Lovely. Good stuff. Well, shall we go back and hear a little bit about the name of the place that I've forgotten?
Westdean.
Westdean.
Yes. Westdean. Let's go and find out about Westdean.
Westdean, then, an iconic garden. Lots of people will know of Westdean. But for those that don't, Tom, tell us a little bit about the history of it and how it came to be such a popular garden that it is now.
Yeah, sure. It was set up by a chap called Edward James, who inherited the estate from his family. And he was a huge supporter of the surrealist art movement, in particular people like Salvador Dali. They created the lobster telephone together. So there was a real sort of history and interest in art and poetry. So after the Second World War, he was quite concerned that a lot of the skills from people that are conservators, artists, they would be lost. So we wanted to create a space where this community of people could sort of practice their art, be creative in a safe space. So Westdean was gifted the house, the estate, and the garden to set up the charity and this community, and that sort of now evolved into an art college. So everything from short courses to degrees in fine art are offered at Westdean. And 30 years ago, two predecessors of mine, Jim Buckland and Sarah Wayne, were brought into Westdean to start a huge restoration project of the garden, the wall garden, and the Victorian glass houses, to complement the work that was going on in the college. And took 30 years of restoration across the site. And we then have now got this art and conservation college, and we've got this Victorian garden that runs alongside each other. And the big challenge for the trustees over recent years is to sort of bring all of that together. So my job as head gardener is to maintain the 90-acre garden, but make it a really inspiring place for people that study here. And I don't think making it a really interesting place for students is exclusive and making it really interesting from the visiting public. So hopefully we've got this really lovely space that we can experiment in, but you've got all these different stakeholders that all mingle with each other, and which creates a really nice sort of community. And I think what's fascinating and daunting from my point of view as a head gardener now is taking that sort of Victorian horticulture, but in a very different set of circumstances, with growing in peat-free compost, without the use of chemicals, not using fertilizers, labor reductions, all that sort of stuff, but still delivering a really interesting garden. And I think one of the scary things for me when I started, and I've been here about 6 years now, is trying to make the garden look the same in perpetuity. So with things like box blight wiping out a lot of our box hedges, how do I make that look the same? And I think the epiphany came to me when I sort of thought to myself, I don't need to make it look the same. It doesn't have to look the same. I don't have to keep beating myself up because I can't achieve the way it looked. And that was incredibly liberating. And I think one of the things that's really exciting is the experimental nature of horticulture at the moment, trying to find plants that can deal with all these climate extremes, with the different pests and diseases. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
And I've only been, I have to put my hands up and apologize, Tom. I've only visited Westdean once, and that was 30 years ago. Jill and I came as a visit on honeymoon. Our honeymoon was in the south of England, and I'm not sure Jill knew what she'd let herself in for, because all the visits we did were to Wisley and to Westdean. They were all gardens, and I think she thought, oh no, this is not what I'd got planned. And I suppose in the 30 years since we were there, it was 1995 when we were there, it will have changed a great deal then, because by the sound of it, the restoration was in the early days then.
Yeah, so the restoration would have been up and running, and I think it sort of then cemented itself as a sort of exemplar of Victorian horticulture. So everything was precise, neat, tidy, and not any disservice to the team at the moment. We still sort of keep that high standard of horticulture, but there's a sort of a slight softening with more of a nod towards biodiversity and perhaps arguably a kinder way of growing. But yes, you would have probably seen it very much after 5 or 6 years of restoration as being that Victorian exemplar, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember, and it's sort of a lasting memory, that the glass houses, because I trained in some old Victorian Edwardian glass houses myself. So I was blown away by these glass houses. And there was a chili festival on at the time when we were there. It was very hot. It was a summer. It was a hot summer. So things looked a bit scorched in places, but I was blown away by it. So we need to come and visit again. Now, obviously, it's brilliant that the gardens are doing what you're doing, but as you say, there's lots of art students there. Do they use the gardens as inspiration and to get ideas?
They do, actually, and it's lovely to see sort of easels around the garden, because it gives me a sense that Westdean is a bit of a unique place, and I really love that. And the garden is there for inspiration, and we try and get people out of the classroom into the garden as much as possible. So, you can have anything from a big vase of dahlias going up into the college for a watercolor course, to then a lot of people that are working with metals that come into the tropical house and take out big cheese plant leaves and then forge a great big metal cheese plant leaf, and take inspiration from some of those tropical leaf forms. So yeah, one of the big challenges is trying to get the garden into every aspect of art, And I mean, you'll be very similar. We bang the drum to say horticulture is art, it's science, it's all these different things, but really sort of feel like I'm on the forefront of trying to bring the relevance of horticulture into every aspect of art, because they're so interlinked. And you look at garden design, we're not a million miles away at all.
No, absolutely. And what about team? How many have you got working with you to keep, not only develop the gardens, but keep them in, really good condition and trial these new plants? Have you got a huge team helping you with that?
So there's 8 of us here,
Mm-hmm.
7 full-time equivalents and 55 volunteers.
Right.
And it's a real gang, a real community. And the volunteers give us usually 1 day a week. So we have a Monday gang and a Wednesday gang, Tuesday gang, and then people see the same faces every week, and they become quite a unit in their own right. And we offer that sort of volunteering, anything from career changes to people that have retired that are looking for a sense of a sort of community and working with people in the outdoor environment. So whether you are incredibly technical as a horticulturalist, or whether you like shoveling mulch around, there's always going to be something for you within a garden this size.
And I suppose as a charity, having those volunteers, that is invaluable, isn't it, to have that extra help? Because you probably wouldn't be able to do it without the volunteers, would you?
No, I don't think there's much probably about it. We'd really struggle with it. So you think about sort of 8 gardeners over 90 acres. That's an awful lot of ground to cover. If it's square meters per gardener, it's quite a lot.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
So we desperately need them. And I think volunteer management and hand in hand with volunteer management is just the way things are. And I think we'd be lost without them.
Yeah.
But there's so many sort of rich experiences that can come from all those different people and those different backgrounds. So we were mulching this morning, and there were 6 of us all around a big trailer full of steaming compost, and all from different walks of life. But I mean, where else are you going to get that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a great leveler, isn't it, gardening? It brings everybody together. Absolutely. Yes. Now, I also mentioned right at the very beginning that, you are a head gardener of this amazing garden, but you're also a broadcaster, writer, and you do some judging with the RHS. That's how we know each other. So how did that all come about, Tom?
So I started it when I was at Parham. The local radio would phone up and say, we've got an event, can you talk about it? And I started to promote the event. And then the producer said, hold on a minute, would you be happy to answer a few questions? It sounds like you've got a bit of a sense of humour. And that's when I started working in Radio Sussex and Surrey for the BBC, and where I met Jim Buttress and started going around doing some of the flower shows from that. And started to get a bit more confidence, doing a few talks for horticultural societies, and then the Daily Telegraph asked me to write a column for them, and I started to realize that people wanted to hear your voice through what you're doing, whether you're on the radio or whether you're on the television or writing. Your personality and your character's got to come through. And it was really interesting over the years to sort of develop my style and be confident in what I'm saying as well. So I've got no problem in sort of ditching jargon and not being an encyclopedia, because I feel confident in that I've done it before. And it's over time that I think I've become a bit more comfortable with myself and the way and that knowledge, that I feel that I actually quite enjoy trying to interpret gardening and horticulture to people and sort of demystify it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, which is good. And that all comes with experience as well, doesn't it, doing that? So I know you're busy in the garden because you've got a lot on. It's a busy time of the year. Have you got more mulching to do this afternoon? Have you got another job on?
Wrapping tree ferns
this afternoon. Okay, right.
So that's this afternoon's job, and then I suspect there might be a bit more mulching, but that's quite good on a cold morning.
Absolutely, it is. Keeps you warm through the winter months, definitely. Before I let you go, Tom, I mean, it's an amazing garden you've got there at Westdean. People can visit all through the year, pretty much, can't they?
All through the year. If they check our website, they can have, if you sort of put into a search engine Westdean, we should pop up, and we're only closed a couple of days of the year. I think they give us Christmas Day and New Year's Day off, but otherwise we are open to the public. And what's really useful about Westdean is there's a lot of hard paths. So you can actually access the majority of the garden with pushchairs, wheelchairs. There's tarmac paths everywhere. So it's actually quite flat as well. Very flat sort of garden to make your way around. So it's very accessible to everybody.
Marvellous. And finally, I mean, you're a very busy man with all that you're doing. What about your own garden? Do you get time to do anything in your own garden at home?
I've just finished writing a book on greenhouses. So for the last year, I've been having and fretting about greenhouses and making sure my tomatoes are ready for the photo shoot and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very pleased that that's now all over. But the most important part of my garden is the seating area where I've got my barbecue, and I can sit there in the evening with a beer, light the barbecue or the fire pit, and that is my happy place.
Don't blame you. Well, you deserve it, because you do a lot of work, so it's just nice to get back, relax and chill out in your own garden, isn't it, Tom?
I think I spend so much time worrying about a garden. I'd like to go home and not worry about one.
Well, yeah, exactly.
That's
yes,
the plan,
that's
yeah.
it. Yes, exactly. Once you've got it as you want it, just enjoy it and use it to sit, relax and socialize it, and don't blame you at all. Tom, thanks very much for breaking off busy schedule at work to come and chat to us on Pots and Trowels. And I'll catch up with you, no doubt, in the spring at one of the flower shows.
Thanks, Martin. No worries.
Cheers. Thanks, Tom.
So Westdean, at sort of historic importance. I was going to say it's not, it is for us, isn't it? Because it was our honeymoon destination.
Oh.
Well, it wasn't purely our honeymoon destination. We were in the area on honeymoon.
You didn't go there on
we didn't
honeymoon,
just go. That was, we had
The busman's holiday with
Yeah,
strikes
no,
again.
it was a busman's holiday. I was
All our
very
holidays are.
naive in those days, and yeah. Oh, we'll go down to this lovely area, he said, and it just happened.
Did it become a business expense as well? Is it?
probably.
Probably. But it was 30 years ago nearly,
It was 30
wasn't it?
years ago this
yeah.
year, yes.
So
exactly.
I think maybe we should go down.
I would
for our
love to go
30th.
back, yes, all joking apart, because it will have changed a lot. And Tom wasn't head gardener then, he's only been there, I think, about 6 years. So I know he's made a lot of changes. So it would be good to go back and just see what he's done and just to refresh your memory. Because what I was really, really blown away with it when we went, especially all the old glass houses, the old Victorian, Edwardian glass houses. So lots of them were made in Nottingham, of course, the old glass houses. One of the manufacturers was Nottingham based, and the old boilers, Robin Hood boilers, were Nottingham. So there was a bit of a link to Nottinghamshire where we came from.
I seem to remember it
as
was
well.
really hot. Everywhere was quite brown and parched, wasn't it?
It was. Well, it was
not unlike Australia. While we were
August.
there,
Yeah, it was.
to be
It was a
fair,
hot
but
summer. It was
it was
August,
a hot summer.
late August.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will go back. I'll take you
Okay,
again.
right.
And we're talking about what Tom's been doing there. It's worth pointing out that the interview with him was recorded before you went to Australia.
Yes.
So he was wrapping his tree ferns. That's not something you would do at this time of year.
No, you would hopefully have done it by now. I mean, tree ferns from New Zealand, beautiful trees with this lovely canopy of fronds on the top. So what you tend to do is wrap the trunk with fleece or hessian just to stop the frost from penetrating them. So he will have been doing that end of November when we recorded it, in preparation for the cold weather that we're experiencing now in January.
I was thinking that. I've just looked out the window earlier,
Yeah.
and it's very frosty here at the moment. So hopefully you've done that if you're listening to this and you've got tree ferns. I've got a couple of questions, Martin, if you're up for it.
Okay. Away.
So this is from BBR on YouTube, and it was on the box blight video. But the question is about agapanthus. I've got some small agapanthus, 1 year old, which are now trying to split the plastic pots. You can see the roots through the bottom, and the small pots, which are 3-inch, are being deformed all around the sides. When should they repot them? Is it now, or should they wait till the spring?
Definitely wait until the spring, because if you pot them now, it's cold, it's frosty, they're just going to sit there in wet, soggy compost. So leave them where they are. I mean, ideally, if wherever you live it's cold and frosty, they need a little bit of protection while they're so small. So if you've got, a cold frame, a cold greenhouse, or even a little porch where you can just get them out the worst of that weather. And then I would wait until probably mid-March time. By then it's warming up, the days are longer, and if they're in small pots, go in a pot with just maybe, an inch or two gap around them. So, 3, 4, 5 centimetres bigger than the small pot. Pop them into that, into a good compost, a well-drained compost, and they'll be fine. The other thing, did you say she'd got 3?
Just some small agapanthus.
Because another thing you can do, if you've got a big pot, you can pot 3 in a triangle shape into that, and they'll bulk up much faster, and you'll get an established plant in faster time. But certainly wait until about March time to do it.
Super stuff.
We have done a video and a podcast with Agapanthus Steve, who is the font of all knowledge
Absolutely.
in Agapanthus. So it's worth having a look and
Yes.
sort of watching that.
Good stuff, good stuff. One other comment just before we get to another question. On the 6 ideas, we did 6 Christmas gift ideas for gardeners. Vanessa says, lovely gifts, Martin, but I'll have the greenhouse, please. To which I responded, yes, me too.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll go to the highest bidder. Yeah.
Very good, very good. Okay. We have another question.
I've got one from Andrea Bradley. Hi, Andrea, one of our top Pots and Trowels fans. Andrea is a member of the RHS and consequently gets their magazine every month. And in December's issue, a little bit of controversy, I think. Now, you haven't actually seen this yet, have you?
No, I haven't read the magazine. I'm catching up on all the old...
Do they not send them to Sydney?
No, they wouldn't send it to me there, yeah.
We've got a big pile of magazines to get through. But there was an article, I think it was entitled Mahonia versus Berberis.
Okay.
So there's a bit of confusion, I think, as to what they're called and who actually has the final say as to
Right,
what's
okay.
called
Well,
what.
both lovely shrubs, Mahonia and Berberis, they are closely related. So Mahonia and Berberis is their genus name, which think of that as a bit like fish. I'm as a genus, then you're a jewelfish, I'm a martinfish. So different species of the fish, as it were. Same with Riley. So that's how plants break down. So you have a genus
I was
name,
in the sea at a minute.
I'm a bit more
species
confused
name,
now.
and then varieties and cultivars. So they are different genus, but they are in the same family. So lots of plants are grouped together in families. And lots of plant names, for those of you that do quite a lot of gardening will know, over the last few years are changing the genus. They're being moved into a different name. And a lot of that is done because obviously when plants were originally named, they would do it. They think this looks like that one, we'll call it a Berberis, we'll call it Mahonia, we'll call it a Pittosporum or whatever. But nowadays with scientists, they can do DNA testing, a lot more research. And there is an international committee of sort of scientists and botanists that take a group of plants and study them and decide if they're named correctly. And it's all brought together by an international code of botanical nomenclature, which is the correct way that we name our plants. So if they find a plant and think, well, actually, that isn't what we think it is, it's actually a different genus, they will move it. And these scientists will all work together. The RHS get involved as well because they've got botanists and scientists. And then they will decide to change the name, essentially. So if you're not sure, the RHS always adopt the new naming. So if you go on the RHS website, then it will have the correct name on there. Berberis is still, to me, Berberis. Mahonia is Mahonia. And as far as I'm aware, they've not had a name change yet, Andrea.
And I think they do often. I've gone to the RHS website and underneath it says formerly known as, almost like Prince.
Yes,
the
right.
plant formerly known as.
Or synonym, something like that. So,
Okay. Good. Right. I have another question here. Actually, it's, well, I don't know. It's a very short question, but hopefully it'll make sense
I'll
to
give
you.
a short answer.
So we had a video about the Hippeastrum / not the Amaryllis just before Christmas. And somebody's asking, do you slice away the enlarged basil plate? Does that mean anything to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, when we potted it, it was a big bulb, if you remember, and it had got a basal plate, which is where the roots had grown from, which was like a piece hanging out the base of the bulb. I've never cut a basal plate off because the roots will come out the side of it. Whether you can or not, I'm not sure, but I've never cut the basal plate off. So I potted it with it on. I did take off any little bits of dead root and that to clean it up, but I potted it in its entirety, and it's actually in the little porch at the back of us now, and it's about so tall with a flower bud forming.
I'm trying to see it. Maybe we should pause and quickly go get it.
I'll go and get it.
All right, we'll cut this bit. Or we could do some interlude music. Your call is important to us. Please stay on the line. And apologies if you're listening to this because you won't even get the payoff of seeing it. But we can describe it to you. I've just seen him come through the window there. He's coming round. He's coming back. Oh, here we go.
There it is.
So here it is.
We can see, this is the big bulb.
So he needs to get back on mic, really. But
your
yeah, go and show the camera.
Here we have it. So
It might work.
big bulb that's
So Martin's talking to the camera now, not the microphone. So I'll just say, he says, here's a big bulb. Here's, it has been, I would say that's verging on slightly phallic.
Yes, I would.
If you don't mind me saying so.
I don't think it focused either when I was down there.
Well,
So-
we'll try and take a
Let's try
photo
it
of it
again.
and show it.
So we can see it's now producing a large flower spike. That's going to be the flower. The leaves are
They just 2 leaves?
They're 2 leaves. And then what it will probably do is produce a second flower spike, because this is a big bulb.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping it nice and cool to stop it getting too tall and leggy. So in a couple of weeks, we'll have flowers on there.
And in terms of the size of the pot, because to me it looks oversized for the
Yeah.
pot, but that's right, is it? It needs to be in that size pot.
Yeah,
for
I
that
mean,
size bulb.
basically, again, I've just got about an inch of compost all the way around it. So there's no point putting it in a bucket size. As long as you keep it watered and fed, it will be perfectly fine in that.
Can you plant those at any time of year?
Well, they do keep them in cold stores. So once you bring them out of the cold store, then yes, I mean, they're available from sort of August through until Christmas. So yes, you've got a window.
If you hadn't planted it when you did and it was lurking in the back of the potting shed and you found it now,
Probably
could you
sprouting,
plant it?
It would probably be sprouting. I would still plant it, but
Yeah.
the fresher the bulb is, the better it will
Yeah.
establish.
I'm
because-
pretending I know what I'm doing here,
You
but
are.
basically I opened a shed and spotted a pot of some of the bulbs I forgot to plant.
Exactly. They're going to be
Well,
soft.
we've all done that, Sean.
Yeah.
They're all sprouting.
got
More
a
than
few,
once, yeah.
Yes. Do you want a few jobs just to finish us
Yeah,
off?
let's finish off.
So-
with
Can
some
I
jobs.
just, have we got time? Can I just go back to the idea of changing a plant name?
Yeah.
Because if you're an exhibitor and you grow that particular plant and it has a change of plant name, presumably you've got a lot of labels in stock ready
yeah,
for your
and
new
branding
stock.
and all sorts of stuff, yeah.
So are they given time?
I think there is normally a sort of a period
changeover.
where...
Yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight
No, not
and
at
they
all.
say,
No. And,
yeah.
and in fairness, some plants, people never know them as their new name. It's like
No.
I'm looking out on a plant in the garden now called Senecio Greyi, which is an Australian evergreen with silvery grey leaves, but it's actually called Brachyglottis, and it's been known for that for the last 20 years or more. But you still see it in garden centres labelled as Senecio Greyi. So not everybody has to take that name on. It's,
But if you were judging at a flower show, you would expect the new name.
yes, if we're judging at a flower show and they're labelled, we expect it to be
Yeah.
what is in the plant finder, the RHS plant finder, which is kept up to date on an annual basis.
Okay.
Good. Right. A few little jobs then. So first one is, Sean, if you've got some bulbs in the shed that you've just found, make sure that you plant them when you get home this afternoon.
But not if the ground
Not if the ground
cold,
is frozen.
cold.
No.
Yeah.
One is checking your house plants, actually, because it is cold where we are. There's not a lot we can do out in the garden. But if you've got a few house plants, we've got very short days at the minute. Light levels have been low, so just make sure they're in a good light source. They need a bit of water, but not too much. Any yellow leaves, take them off. So just to sort of keep them ticking over until those longer days come along.
I've got some of that plant grow house plant booster. Could I just put some of that on the top and just help them out with that? Would that work?
Yeah, I mean, you can do, or you could. I would probably wait until spring, because that's going to have some nutrients in. And what we don't want to do is kickstart them into growth at the minute.
Too
because
early.
It's too early.
Yeah,
but
okay.
And that's great for mixing into compost as well. If you've got some compost you bought,
pop
mix
them
that in just to enrich it. But so we'll be using some of that. If you've got any outdoor containers, again, check them, make sure they're not frozen solid. If they're waterlogged, just lift them up off the ground a little bit so that the water can drain out of them. Tidy the greenhouse. Any volunteers that like my greenhouse, you can come and help me tidy it. Great time to give it a clean down, get rid of all the cobwebs.
Make it more valuable for our lowest bids.
Exactly. So it's all about now preparation and getting ready for the growing season ahead. So a few bits you can be doing out there in the garden.
Good stuff. Well, look, I think we're probably running out of time for this episode. Next week we have got someone from the RHS.
Yes,
on, I believe.
Sarah Poll, who is head of shows development. She's going to talk to us all about the RHS shows.
Some really interesting new locations coming up, so do listen to that one. And if you've got a chance to do us a review, please do drop us a review on whatever website or podcast user what do you call them?
Platform,
Providers.
is it?
Platforms, yes. Whatever you use anyway to listen to this or watch this, drop us a review. We'd really appreciate it. And remember, the one thing I haven't said all show, if you've got a question, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. It should be up on the screen now if you're watching this. So yeah, we're about there, are we?
Yeah,
I think we
yeah.
are.
We'll see you next week.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.